Listeners of the Tron podcast, this is your host, Rashad Woods. I've always had the opportunity to talk to fascinating people, and that's the reason I created this show. And nothing epitomizes this curiosity and the opportunity to talk to interesting people like the current guest that I have right now. She's an author, former nun, archaeologist, I believe former archaeologist, and all-around global and world traveler, N.L. Holmes. Thank you. Hey, this is an honor. This is. I mean, your biography, honestly, I'm not trying to be, probably heard it sounds like Indiana Jones. I can't.
It's kind of spotty.
Yeah,
Fortunately, there's nothing that locks you into one path in life.
It's amazing. Can you please just dive into your background, please?
Well, I grew up in Texas, and I knew from a very young age that I wanted to go into archaeology. But I got sidetracked at college. I studied archaeology, but I was in the honors program, so there was not like it was a different major in itself. So, and then this was in the '60s, and everybody was sort of searching for meaning, and
Right.
it was kind of the existential crisis of the '60s there. So I quit college and went into the antiques business briefly with the help of my family, and I did that for a couple of years. And more it was clear this was not, it was a profession, not a calling. So
Yeah.
I started looking into the discalced Carmelite nuns, and after a year or so of groping around in that, I entered the order and spent the next 19 years of my life there.
That's
And then
amazing.
I came out and went back to school immediately and got my degree in archaeology and started teaching and excavating and everything, and did that for 25 years, I guess. And then I retired, and then I started to write. So.
And you're actually, first of all, I went to Catholic school. I went to a Catholic elementary school for 7 years. But that's a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
So, I always found that was fascinating, that you delved into that and then went to archaeology. Was there a period in time when you were, as a nun, that you were still fascinated? Did you do anything related to archaeology, history? Obviously, there's a lot of history of religion as a whole, but was there something that you were working towards where it got towards the later years of being as a nun that you said you wanted to pivot and do this instead?
No, not really. This was not one of the sort of teaching or intellectual orders. They were
Okay.
cloistered. They were, dedicated to prayer and contemplation.
Okay.
And so it was almost anti-intellectual in a strange way.
Okay.
But we had, a set of the great books, and I did read
Yeah.
that. And
Beautiful.
I encountered Aristophanes, the comic playwright of ancient
Yeah.
Greece. And curiously enough, that sort of gelled for me the direction I wanted to go with archaeology. When I had
I'm
been in
glad.
college as a young person,
Yeah.
I didn't know really what culture I wanted to pursue, and I was sort of drifting towards Mesoamerica, Mayas
Beautiful.
perhaps. But this pushed me in that direction.
When what are some of the misconceptions about archaeology? Because there's so many movies and that have that in there because history is so rich. But your travels have taken you around the world, and I'm fanning out right now because I'm a history buff. I really am, because I'm like, there's so many things I want to just rattle off, but I need to kind of compose myself. So you had a chance to go to Greece, Israel, Lebanon. What was it? Part of educational? Was it part of a group? How does that field work and operate? How did that take you to those locations?
Well, excavations, because they cost so much, are usually sponsored by a university.
Mm-hmm.
So in Crete, I was with the University of Toronto. In
Oh,
Israel, I was with the University of Duke University.
Wow.
And in the Lebanese material was through, I guess, Haverford College.
Okay.
And so, you apply to work with the group.
Yeah.
And I was a graduate student at the time I started.
Yeah.
So I was recommended by a professor who knew me, and I made my application. And in neither case was I actually a trench worker, because I had other kind of skills that were useful.
Yeah.
So in Crete, I was the dig house manager and chief cataloger, so which was nice because I got to see everything that came out of the ground.
Right.
And in Israel, I was an artist, so I drew all the pieces.
Beautiful.
And it was a lot of fun. Again, you get to see everything. You're not. Occasionally, I would substitute as a trench master if somebody had to be absent. So I got
Okay,
my
what's
field
that
experience.
position? I'm not familiar with that.
That would be like actually supervising a
Okay,
group of workmen in a
okay,
trench.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. I saw, one of your interviews you had done before where, this is backdating a bit off this topic where you were actually said that in Florida that they were finding cemeteries and things under buildings and various other. So the unfortunate reality is a lot of these historical places with a lot of things now have current buildings and businesses that are over on top of them. That's got to be a
Oh,
challenge for
yeah.
your work. And then people's relatives and descendants or history that was lost, so to speak. That has to be a large challenge of your line of work.
Yeah, it is. There's a whole branch of archaeology that they call um, gosh, what is the word now? Well, it's the people who run in ahead of a construction job
Hmm.
and try to excavate to some extent, just enough to know what's down there. And
Of course.
for example, in Athens, when they were digging the subway system
Oh
before
my
the
goodness.
Olympic Games,
Yeah.
everywhere they dig, they kept finding, ancient buildings, and they'd have to
Unbelievable.
rush the archaeologists down there, and so now
Yeah.
they have them all displayed in the
Yeah.
underground, so you can
For
kind of
sure.
see them. But still, it's frustrating because you can't take the time.
Yes.
And normally, when you excavate a site, you always leave a corner
Yeah.
undug so that future generations with better technology can come back and learn more out of it. So all that's
Unbelievable.
unfortunately salvage archaeology. That's the term I was. Yeah.
Well, I just find it, because, is it better? How does that work? Is it the preservation of it once it's located and then it's better left as a historical landmark walled off? Like, how does that process work when things of,
Well,
of high level value or history are found?
usually when they're cleared, they will be, if it's sort of minor value or at least of lesser public interest, they'll fill it back up
Okay.
with dirt. So
Oh,
so
wow.
it doesn't degrade further.
Right.
But in
Right.
some cases, like the excavation, well, both the sites where I was excavating, they're left cleared and they're turned into a kind of park
Okay.
where people can come and you have walkways indicated
Yeah.
here and there. And
Right.
hopefully you'll keep the tourists from walking on the stone walls and stuff and
Understood.
ruining them. But there's no guarantee. So
Absolutely.
really filling them in is best.
Oh, man.
But you don't want to deprive people of the beautiful spectacle of a
Right.
city. For example, in Crete, it was a port city. It was right on the sea. It was literally covered by the sea to some extent, and that part was lost, of course. But you
Yeah.
had ship sheds and,
Oh, yeah.
pottery kilns, and it was a whole life spread out there in front of you. And it's
Right.
it's wonderful for people to be able to see actually how others lived in the past.
Yeah, it's funny. You always see like these statues, like the Colossus of Rhodes, but there's no
Mhm.
longer any of that existing, right? Because
Right, yeah,
it got melted down, right?
exactly.
And it was an inspiration for the Statue of Liberty. So
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I love stuff like that. Obviously, I'm a surface level conversation when it comes to your level of expertise, but I love looking stuff like this up.
Well, great. I mean, that's archaeology needs to interface more with the public. I think we've kind of talked back and forth to ourselves long enough. You feel like there's five people in the world who are interested in my little subject,
No,
but you
no.
need to popularize and go out and make this accessible to the world. I mean, who knows
I,
where the next archaeologist is going to come from?
I mean, there's just so many places of the world that haven't been tapped, right? I mean, and
Right.
this is coming from somebody, just in Michigan, but the world's much bigger than your backyard or your zip code.
Well, and there's plenty of archaeology in Michigan too. Native American sites, very
Yes,
important.
absolutely, absolutely. And just being able to every time you drive, there's a story or a history behind that
Right.
road, that woods, that building, or what's underneath it. And I think too often people look at things at the surface level. Now, you are a prolific author, and obviously, I think I've just touched on your archaeological work as well as your nun work. But I'm really fascinated about you as the author, and you have several best-selling books as well too. How did you transition into authorship?
Well, I grew up in a family that loved books. I mean, we read aloud to each other as entertainment, and my cousin and I would sit around and, write mini novels as just to have fun. And so it was not a huge jump.
Yeah.
And this same cousin had actually written and published a book. by
Wonderful.
the time I retired. So I thought, well, shoot, it's something you can really do. So
Mhm.
um, I just got in there and started writing, read a lot, and
Right.
I looked at lectures went to conferences and things just to see what the procedure was,
Correct.
how to produce a text, and then how to get it out there too. So I went through all those hoops and then started writing. And it was easier than I expected in some ways.
Mhm.
Maybe because I had a fair bit of stuff to say.
I mean, listen, not a lot of people can come from that background. You hear people all the time that want to write a book, but you have the background, and and I say this respectfully to people who write. You have a large story to tell about the things that you want to talk about, and the
Yeah, you
basis
have to
of
have
your
a story.
yeah, and the basis of your writing was based on a lot of lived experiences that you had. And how do you weave historical fiction? Because those are always funny when you watch a movie or watch a show, and then you have the people who come on, and say that's not what really happened, but I was really
Yeah.
entertained, right? I mean, we're here to be entertained. So,
Well, in the first place, it sort of harks back to what we were talking about a minute ago. The idea of bringing history to the world, I mean, in a popular way so people can understand it and it isn't so dry and boring,
oh,
it becomes something living. So
right,
that's kind of how I saw my writing as well as my teaching. It
right,
was a matter of sort of slipping some solid, reliable history in with a human story
right.
so that people could enjoy the story, maybe learn a little something about human nature, which
Of
is
course.
always the what a novelist is trying to do, but then also learn some genuine histories. Most of, or I guess pretty nearly all of my books start with a historical event or a fact
Right.
or people who are real.
Yeah.
And then you just sort of turn your imagination loose and think, well, why did King so and so make this decision and not something else? What kind of person does that mean he was? Or
Correct.
what sort of factors was he dealing with? And you put yourself in their head and you just start living forward, and the story unfolds as
Yeah.
it would in real life, according to
Absolutely.
the decisions you make.
For sure. And so you have several different novel series, the Lord Hani Mysteries. Can we
Mhm.
go into details about that, please?
Yeah, that one is set in ancient Egypt and its colonies, and it centers on a real person. Lord Hani was a diplomat whom we encounter in the Amarna letters, and that's a diplomatic correspondence that was found in the capital of the pharaoh Akhenaten. So it deals with a, a lot of interactions between Egypt and other countries, or Egyptian diplomats abroad in the middle of the 14th century BC. And so
Wonderful.
there were so many references to Hani, different missions he was sent on, different people he interacted with. I started turning those into novels that were set in a really exciting period of Egyptian history, which is when Akhenaten, this heretic pharaoh that
The
I guess
father
if
of
there's one
people.
pharaoh people know about, it's him.
Yeah.
When he came to the throne, there was a huge social and religious upheaval. So, in addition to being missioned out on these various diplomatic missions, Hani would have had to deal with all of this upheaval at home. And so I made him come from a family that had priests of Amun Ra,
Wow.
which means they would have been right on the front line of these attacks,
Yeah.
the social upheaval. So it just
Unbelievable.
gave me a way to talk about that
Yeah.
and introduce people to the kind of real trauma I think a lot of families would have encountered in a moment like that.
Do you ever find, like, obviously, because sometimes, and I say this respectfully, when movies come out, right, and then
Mhm.
they get banned from certain countries because of the depiction
Yeah.
of do you ever run into those issues where you're like, hey, I'm just telling a fictitious story about a historical character, but it could run afoul to some locations on their history?
Yeah, that could happen. No one has ever given me any static
I'm
about it.
glad.
So,
I'm glad.
yeah,
Okay.
me too, because
Yeah.
that's not easy to deal with. I
I
mean,
want
you
to say,
do, yeah, yeah, you do deal with individual readers who might be offended by something, but you know, you think about in advance. You think about, I have to deal with this truthfully. But it's according to my opinion.
absolutely,
So other people are free to have other opinions.
absolutely.
So you just, I'm sorry if this offends you, but
This is
I'm
just
writing for a bigger public than one, and
or
everybody's got a different take.
And you're free to read something else too.
Exactly.
You're free. So, and then we have the Empire at Twilight. Can we talk about that? That's about the Hittite Empire.
Yeah, and this was the first one that I started. I've written some later.
Yeah.
But it takes place in an empire which is very little known today. The Hittites inhabited what is now Turkey in the Bronze Age,
Yep.
and they were spoken Indo-European language like Latin and Greek.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting, and they were warlike, but that was not what attracted me about them. They had a very sort of noble code of ethics. Whether they lived by it, I don't know, but it was there. So that you were not supposed to go to war unless you absolutely had to defend your country.
Yeah.
And the king was not absolute. He was answerable to a kind of a council that was composed of all the people in the government. And so, some traits that we recognize as very modern.
Right.
He wasn't an absolute monarch, in fact, in the way that the Egyptian king was. So I wanted to kind of tap into that interesting thread. We don't know a whole lot about them in some ways, but we do have enough documents to, we know some things that happened to them, and we get some glimpses into the personality of their readers. So, that seemed like an interesting place to start.
I would certainly be a fan of that work. I have to imagine, like, just in my head, I'm like, I gotta imagine, like, with all the movies and shows that come out, and I don't want to, in case something is in the works, but this seems like some stuff that would just be a fascinating TV series, miniseries.
I would think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just because of all the things that we get a chance to watch on television. So I hope that, that there's an opportunity for you, obviously I hope it's favorable for you, but if there's an opportunity for your work to be displayed in various other medium, I would be a fan to watch it as well too.
That would be great. From your mouth to God's ear, as they say.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get picked for a series, but
I'm sure it's not. I'm sure.
I think, in particular, I think the Egyptian stories would be interesting.
I mean, because the thing, and here's one of my questions too, is what are some of, and there's another series obviously I want to talk to you about as well too, but what are some of the misconceptions about ancient Egypt, if I could ask?
I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on that.
What are some of the misconceptions, because there's so many series that are made on Egypt, what are some of the misconceptions that we see on TV and film that you have found out, like, hey, that's really not true, or they did this instead?
Well, I have a kind of a pet peeve about the way Akhenaten and Nefertiti are treated in most. I mean, somehow he's gotten to be this hero, the first monotheist and all this benevolent person who gave everything to his country. He was an absolute monarch who just drove his country to bankruptcy to further his own ideas, which were not monotheistic, by the way. It was a political move in order to curb the power of the 𝐻𝐸𝐻 priesthood, and it was devastating. You can like it or not, but the 𝐻𝐸𝐻 priest had held about 40% of the land in Egypt, and you take that away and put it all in the king's little parcel there, and I mean, it makes a bad situation worse, from what I can tell. So I think that has been treated very naively, and you won't find any Egyptologists who like him, but you'll find an awful lot of readers of popular literature who do. And so if I can blacken his name a little, I'm here to do it.
It's awesome. Okay, because I was just curious about that. I was like, how does that get woven? Because obviously people, fiction can tell one side, and if you don't research those particular things, it could ultimately become the truth, so to speak.
I mean, as I've said before, everybody's entitled to an opinion, but if you look at the facts and examine them with much depth, it was not as pretty as we like to think.
I watched a documentary, when they were talking, I think they were doing, like, I'm prefacing this, it was either about the pyramids or it was about how they were doing with, like, to irrigate water systems, and everything was being obviously chiseled by hand, so to speak, right? And there were thousands and thousands of people, and it was so detailed they could even tell if people had back and foot and physical problems based upon how the stone, how these things were laid upon each other. And it was so immaculate and so detailed, and they're doing all these things without, a book or a reference point of how to actually do this, and they're doing it from scratch. That's got to be something during your work that you have to sit back. How did these people manage to make things so even without any
Yeah,
sort of traditional math?
it is amazing, but it just goes to show human beings are really smart. If you give them a problem, they
Right,
go out and solve it
for
with
sure.
perhaps very primitive tools and simple principles like water lies
Mhm.
level. It's
Yeah,
the people have tried to reproduce the accuracy of the pyramids, and they can't do it,
isn't
even
that
with
a yeah? I saw that
modern
on there.
engineers.
I saw
So
that.
the good news for the king of Egypt was that he had a limitless supply of work, and they were not slaves, by the way. They
Okay,
were citizens paying their taxes in labor. So they would owe the king so many weeks or months of labor. And if they were skilled, if they were a stone cutter, well, all better. But if they were just a farmer or something, they would either provide food for the workmen or they'd get out there and haul rocks or something. So it was uh, almost limitlessly funded because the king owned all the resources,
correct.
and he had the best of all the workmen at his disposal, and it was
So you have the
just
cream.
incredibly motivated.
Yeah,
So
you have the cream of the crop and an unlimited group of people to do it.
yeah, and of course the fact that the Nile River was really the highway of the country
Right.
made it possible to ship huge, heavy things right up to, they would dig channels and basins right up to the work site. And so they
Right.
could float these monstrous stones right up to where they needed them and then just
I
drag them
saw that in
across.
the documentary as well too, and I don't remember if it was that or Greece, but they talked about that there might have been the largest boat in history um, at one point.
Probably the pyramids. I know. Well, I don't know. There were some pretty big Greek boats in
Yeah,
Egypt once the Greeks took over, but they
correct.
used to float, for example, obelisks, these great long
What
single
I
pieces of stone,
saw? Yes,
on a huge boat that was so long
yes,
and thin that it should have cracked down like that. But they
yes.
trussed it up so to hold it against the weight,
Yeah,
it was experience. They did these things over and over and perfected their techniques and learned from mistakes. And also they wrote down what they did so the next generation could improve on it. So
that's absolutely amazing. That's
it's
absolutely
truly impressive. And one of my characters in the latest series of books is a physician. So that has let me sort of investigate Egyptian medicine, which was remarkably sophisticated for the period. It was far and away more scientific than anything that was going on around them.
that's amazing.
So, they're genuinely impressive people.
Hani's Daughter Mysteries.
Hmm.
Can we talk about that book series?
Okay. Well, that's a cozy mystery series. It's kind of the least serious of all the books,
That's okay.
least based on historical events. It's
Hmm.
um, Hani had 5 children, and the youngest daughter is sort of irrepressible, sassy
Hmm.
little kid who grows up through the Hani Mysteries. We see her start off at 7, and
Yeah.
she's 24 when the books end. So she gets her own series. She and her partner and a young girl that they have adopted as an apprentice. And so it's not about their work as doctors, but that plays into it. And we see them analyzing poisons, for example, in a primitive way and treating wounds and even doing things like amputating. So it's let me do some research into a really interesting area. We
Well,
happen to have 5 or 6 old papyrus manuscripts about medicine. So we know they had case books. And it
wow.
would give symptoms and say, if you see these symptoms, this is what's wrong, this is what you
Oh,
do.
wow.
If it reaches the point where you start seeing this symptom or that symptom, tell them you can't treat them. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really interesting. And it's an interesting mix of sort of witch doctory, hocus pocus, you might say,
Okay.
and genuine sort of folk medicine where you use things that probably were proved over time to have real value. For example, willow bark,
Okay.
which contains salicylic acid, and that's what's in aspirin. So
That's amazing.
like other folk doctors, they knew something about herbalism and how
Yeah.
to use medicine and things, but also it was mixed with magic and with religion. So they would say prayers and
Yeah.
uh, put spells on people and things. But even there, if you think about the idea of holistic medicine, if people believe that this is helping them, then their own body starts kicking in with the immune system, and it probably does give them a little boost. So between the real science and the sort of pseudoscience, they were highly successful.
I think it's always amazing too because you look at a lot of the Latin terms that still are prevalent today when it comes to the use of medicine and use of things and the origin of things. That some of them still have the same original terminologies as well too.
Right, it still works. It still matches what we see.
Yeah, it's pretty
Oh,
amazing.
this is an interesting factoid. You'll like this because you're interested in this. The RX that we use to symbol drugs, that started out as the Eye of Horus, this long eye with a thing sticking down that was the hawk's
Really?
eye with the line of feathers that comes down on the hawk. So
Oh
that
wow!
was originally what that was, and then the Greek physicians in Egypt turned it into letters because
Did
that's
not
what it
know that.
looked like to them. Yeah, that's kind of fun.
That's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And like I said, unless you're in that, and then we default to stuff just because that's what all we think of, but we never,
Right. Yeah,
know.
unless you kind of go into it.
Yeah, that's fascinating and as amazing. What's the life like of a retired archaeologist? You still get obviously you're a prolific writer, so you've segued into authorship.
Yeah,
But do you
that's
still
pretty
get
good.
called for things like to or anything like that?
Not really, because I wasn't a specialist in any particular area. I chose to go general,
Okay.
and I taught a wide variety of classes, which means that it's not like if you find some potsherd from the 12th century, you call on Nikki. I mean, I was not that kind of
Okay.
drilling deep expert on any particular thing. So,
Right.
so no, my life as an archaeologist that's part of the past now. Except that I'm still doing research for my books. That's I
Well,
try
that's
to keep up with
hmm.
the latest what's going on, just so I don't present falsities to my readers.
I would certainly suggest that even though you're retired, you still have a highly level of skills that most of the world would never be able to tap into. So certainly just
Well, they would if they studied. It just it just got to take a little time and do it. It's basically all.
absolutely. Is there anything that we have not discussed about your career and life that you would like our audience to know?
Well, as I mentioned, I was an archaeological artist for a while. A lot of all my life, I've done a lot of visual art, painting,
Mhm.
and other stuff. And I think that actually has influenced my writing to some extent because
Mhm.
if you paint, it makes you very conscious of what things look like. Effects of light and shadows and stuff like this. And then you want to present that to people in words as
Right.
part of the background of the setting of your book as you present it. So, yeah, I think that has colored me as a writer.
Got it.
I hope in a good way.
I think that I've always said this to many of my fascinating guests on my show, but this is certainly one of the top for me because I always watch all those documentaries and books that I read, and I'm a Wikipedia. Obviously, Wikipedia. I'm sure you're like it's not accurate, right? Don't just Wikipedia everything.
No, it's actually not bad. People don't let it stay inaccurate very long.
Right, they have scholars and people that that update
Yeah.
it, and people. But all the things that I read, and I'm like, wow, I get a chance to talk to somebody who lives this medium and this lifestyle, and so this was certainly one of the more fascinating opportunities. And I
Oh,
feel like
good.
half an hour is kind of an injustice to all the things I wanted to dive into, but I want to be very cognizant and conscious of your time as well too. So. I hope that I get a chance to watch one of your books get adapted to TV, film, or
Me
miniseries.
too.
You know,
Put out good vibes.
I mean, listen, I'm just a podcaster, but I certainly think that there's an opportunity and an interested audience in it. It has been an absolute thrill and an honor to be with ML Holmes on the Randomness of Nothing podcast.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it, and you have a wonderful day.
Same to you.